So, a lot's happened since I last posted a video. Namely, my most anticipated movie of 2026 came out and has taken the world by storm. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is not only his highest grossing film, but will also be a cinematic event we won't soon forget. For me, however, none of those matters as much as the fact that this film confirms we are seeing a new side of Christopher Nolan. Though proving to be his most successful release ever, this is actually an evolution in his cinematic voice that's worth talking about. I thought it would make sense to start with a general review of the film, because as significant as this movie is in his filmography, I can't say it's even in my top half of Nolan films. I know, it hurts me too. I even waited to watch it a second time before making this video to see if I'd rectified any of my issues, but sadly, it didn't. So first, let's get into what I really like about this movie. I guess we can start with the technical elements, but what else is there to say here? This is filmmaking at its best, from the cinematography to the sound design. This certainly feels like its hefty budget, which is more than you can say about most film these days. It's one of those movies you watch and you think, yeah, it makes sense that this cost $250 million to make. And from a thematic and narrative perspective, this movie is really an extension of the themes in Oppenheimer, and when it taps into that, it is incredible. The monologue and images that accompany the Odysseus track on the soundtrack perfectly ties the story together as a result of betraying what we hold sacred as human beings. But tonally, this feels different than Oppenheimer, because it's far more melancholic than it is a warning. If Oppenheimer ended with a sense of hopelessness, this one ends with acceptance of one's fate. And that brilliant third act, besides the fight scene that lasted a bit longer than I wanted it to, follows some of his most impressive sequences. Whether it be the Circe scene, the visit to Hades, it was so refreshing to see him commit wholeheartedly to how dark these events can be. And the edit perfectly mimics the fragmented nature the story was passed down as, which may be jarring at times but proves why Jennifer Lame is one of the most expressive editors working today. So, on to what I didn't really like. First, the opening 30 minutes is when I have most felt people's complaints about Nolan's exposition problem. All that section is doing is getting you up to speed in the most boring way possible, and I felt that a lot more in this movie compared to his others. It also presents Telemachus as an important character only for him to be forgotten about for the entire second hour in which he just receives information. Actually, from a writing perspective and kind of from an acting perspective, Telemachus is actually the weakest character, and that brings me to my second issue, which I know I'm in the minority for, but no performance here to me was impressive. I thought that would change on a rewatch, but everyone here is just fine. I mean, of course, no one is bad, and a lot of the actors get some good scenes, but I didn't walk away with one sticking in my head, like Heath Ledger as the Joker, Cillian Murphy as Oppenheimer. Even Kenneth Branagh in Tenet left more of an impact than anyone here. Matt Damon is really only convincing in that third act, and that completely makes sense because that's the thesis of this film, but everything else was played to classic Matt Damon effect, and this made the scenes where he fires the extra arrow at the Cyclops or straps himself to the mast to be the only one who listens to the sirens feel more random than they should. So that's why for me this is just short of my favorite Nolan films. Quick ranking here to show you guys where this stands. Oh, and one more thing while we're here. The criticisms about the casting, the American accents, and all of that stuff, none of that bothered me at all. Sure, the American accents made it feel a bit out of place, but that's just like placing Shakespearean speak in modern LA and Romeo plus Juliet. And when it comes to people being so sensitive to the adaptation, certain casting choices, I don't really know why so many people felt so personally about the story that has essentially been adapted throughout time in multiple versions. For some, I assume it's the actual last book they read, and are clinging to their high school English teacher's interpretation of it because they got a bad grade on their final essay about it. Sorry, that was a bit mean. Anyway, regardless of mine or anyone else's thoughts about the movie, The Odyssey proves that what Christopher Nolan was doing in Oppenheimer wasn't a once-off. In many ways, this movie charters a new course in his career. Oppenheimer and The Odyssey don't just share the same thematic DNA, but also the same DNA stylistically. For example, Nolan films pre-Oppenheimer felt as if you were always driving down a smooth road. Twisted, winding, yes, but smooth nonetheless. With Oppenheimer and The Odyssey, that road now has speed bumps, curbs you have to drive over, pedestrians you have to swerve around, in addition to it being winding and twisted. His ventures into horror, the montage-like nature of his edit, and even a lot of his action make his latest films thornier than his previous ones. In other words, I feel like he's shedding a lot of the pressure to make his movies palatable to everyone, and is more concerned with how big studio films can get audiences to actually care about the dangers of nuclear discovery, or betraying the inherent social contract we share with everyone, instead of just making high-concept spectacles like dream sharing and Fifth Dimensions. To draw a comparison, it's like the shift Martin Scorsese has made. The Wolf of Wall Street is the last hurrah of old-era Scorsese, indulging in propulsive filmmaking, sensation, and anger in his characters. We all thought silence was a once-off thing, but The Irishman showed everyone that this was one of our most respected directors finally committing to a new direction, while still retaining his original voice that made him special. From that perspective, it's interesting to look at Tenet as Nolan's last hurrah of his previous sensibilities too. It feels like he's getting all of his fascination with manipulating time as an aesthetic choice more than anything out of his system, and making his last effort to make his 30-year-old self happy by making something of a Bond film. Watching the insane amount of interviews he's done for the Odyssey, it's clear that if he would have made this when he was initially attached to direct Troy, before Batman Begins, it would be a very different movie indeed. One a bit more convoluted, far more commercial than this already is, and PG-13. And now I can't see Nolan making a PG-13 movie again. So, The Odyssey, while not my favorite of his films, will forever be a pivotal movie for him and an experience I won't forget. Not because of the hype, the criticisms, the box office, but because it makes me even more excited for what he's going to do next. Much like Odysseus' journey began in the aftermath of Troy, The Odyssey feels like the beginning of a new chapter for Christopher Nolan. One that, if this film is any indication, may be every bit as dramatic as the consequences of defying the gods. Hope that satisfied your Nolan craving after the massive support on the Best Moments video. Thanks for that, by the way. Let me know what you thought of The Odyssey, and I will see you all in the next one.